Tēnā koutou katoa. My name is Pip Muir and I was appointed by New Zealand Rugby to lead the review into the Black Ferns culture and environment. Over the past 3 months, Tammy Wilson Ului Narari, Tammy Wilson Ului Nayare and I, Tammy, who's a former Black Fern and a current university academic, and I interviewed over 50 current and former players, coaches, management, and other rugby stakeholders. Together with our wider review panel, Gilbert Anoka and Eleanor Butterworth, and our cultural advisors, Luke Crawford and Savia Tama Aroni Clark, we are today releasing our report with our key findings and recommendations. The review panel wishes to thank everyone who participated in this review. Your insights and experiences were invaluable. At the outset, we want to acknowledge the significant whakapapa and legacy created by the Black Ferns. The Women's Rugby World Cup was only officially sanctioned by the NZRFU in 1991, and in that relatively short period of time, the Black Ferns have won 5 of the 7 Women's Rugby World Cups. An extraordinary achievement. The terms of reference for this review tasked us with looking at what is and isn't working in the Black Ferns culture and environment, what can be improved, and are there any behavioural or wellbeing concerns. The key themes our panel have identified after the interviews and considering all of what we have heard are: 1, there are challenges in the Black Ferns high performance environment, as players, management and systems have transitioned to a semi-professional model. The culture amongst the Black Fern players is strong, but it's not fully aligned with management. Thirdly, management structures do not always appropriately support the Black Ferns culture and environment. 4, the player leadership structure is positive, but it needs refinement. Fifthly, there are significant communication issues that exist between players, coaches and managers, the union, the NZRPA and other stakeholders. Sixthly, there are health and wellbeing gaps in the environment for players and management. And finally, New Zealand rugby structures have not sufficiently supported women's high performance rugby in New Zealand. In our report under these 7 key themes, we have made a total of 26 recommendations, which are designed to help optimise the culture and environment of the Black Ferns going forward. We'll now take you through each of those recommendations, but before doing that, I'm going to hand over to Tammy to briefly outline the background context to this review. Tammy.
Black Ferns team started in 1989, and for many years the players had no financial support. They had to contribute financially to go on tours. The team is decentralised, with players residing throughout Aotearoa, New Zealand. It is a testament to the pride we have in the Black Ferns jersey and the legacy that we have created, that we have achieved so much on the World Rugby stage with 5 World Cup wins in such a short period of time. However, it was not until 2018 that New Zealand Rugby set up the Professional Performance Programme for Women's Rugby, with contracted Black Ferns players receiving a guaranteed retainer, assembly fees and other benefits. Support is also provided to the Black Ferns through the provincial unions, and the NZR has also recently resourced 5 regional hubs to provide additional support for contracted players. These have been positive moves by New Zealand Rugby to resource the semi-professional environment for players who typically only assemble together for training camps or games and tours. The level of professionalism in women's rugby in New Zealand has evolved at pace in recent years. NZR had planned 8 test matches for the Black Ferns for the 2020 season, with 7 of those to be held in New Zealand. But COVID lockdowns and travel restrictions meant they had to be cancelled. NZR managed to organise a revised 3-match series in November 2020, a possibles versus probables game and 2 barbarian matches. But no formal campaign review was held after those games. And in response to feedback from some players, NZRPA arranged a formal feedback process which raised a number of concerns about management and the Black Ferns environment. This led to the Player Leadership Group meeting in January 2021 and they then met with management in what has become known as the reset meeting to address the feedback and look at ways to work positively together, particularly as 2021 was meant to be the year that New Zealand hosted the Women's Rugby World Cup. However, the ongoing COVID pandemic and arrival of the Delta variant led to the postponement of the Women's Rugby World Cup, which will now be held in New Zealand in October and November of this year, 2022. Instead, NZR was able to arrange at short notice a 4-test Northern Tour to England and France in October 2021. Due to lockdowns and the inability to train or practice together for much of the year, the team felt they were underdone going into that tour, and unfortunately they lost all 4 matches. However, players and coaches alike said the team performances improved while they were away. And I'll hand over to Pip to continue.
On the Northern Tour, the group had to cope with the ongoing pandemic restrictions, COVID testing, and some significant traumas. One incident involved Te Kura Ngāta Ringa Mātai, a long-standing and senior member of the Black Ferns, who broke down on the eve of the 3rd test in Toulouse when she was told she would not be in the starting lineup or the match day 23 for that test. Te Kura says it was not the non-selection that caused her to break down, but the culmination of 8 years of being negatively impacted and not feeling valued, other than for the cultural aspects she brought to the team. Te Kura says her non-selection was the final straw and led to her breaking down in the team naming meeting. In the days that followed, Te Kura was not properly supported or monitored, and the review team is of the view that what occurred to Te Kura that night and in the days that followed was not well managed or monitored and should have been escalated. The team then returned to MIQ in New Zealand in late November 2021 for a period of isolation, and they all completed a campaign survey while in MIQ, and there was a lot of concerning feedback in their responses. And on the 6th of December 2021, after being advised that she was not being contracted for the 2022 season, and without any reasons being given for not being contracted, Te Kura's feelings of isolation, ghosting, of not being a favourite only deepened, and she felt she had nothing to lose and nowhere else to turn but to go public with her concerns. So she made her Instagram post. Since making that post, we understand that Te Kura has received significant additional wellbeing and representation support. Although Te Kura's courage resulted in the initiation of the review, her concerns were not isolated, and some other players, particularly Māori and Pacifica, had either experienced similar behaviour, witnessed it, or been told about it. Our terms of reference make it clear that the review is not to ascertain whether Te Kura's allegations were true. However, a number of other current and recent past Black Ferns players also shared concerns with us about poor communication leading to misunderstandings and issues of favouritism or ghosting, a lack of timely or specific feedback, insufficient holistic support, and insufficient investment in understanding how to coach women and the structures to support this. Now, we are aware and mindful of the fact that a number of people could be impacted by the review. Our aim is not to do harm, but to make recommendations that are designed to optimise the culture and environment of the Black Ferns going forward. So turning to our 26 recommendations, these are grouped under the 7 key themes that we discussed at the outset. First, the Black Ferns high performance environment. New Zealand Rugby has done a great deal of positive work with players, management and the RPA to move the Black Ferns into the professional era. However, there is no clear or consistent high-performance vision, practices or mindset. This needs to be addressed. Next, there are some capability gaps in management, due in large part to a historic lack of robust recruitment, training or support processes by the NZR. Accordingly, New Zealand Rugby should review the Black Ferns' current team management coaching structure to reassess current capabilities to lead the Black Ferns until the 22 Women's Rugby World Cup and beyond, to create an environment that is safe and inclusive with regard to culture, gender and sexuality, and address any gaps in these capabilities. This capability should be assessed by credible experts. provide immediate support and mentoring for any current capability gaps, and take a more proactive role in monitoring the Black Ferns environment while any changes occur. Our third recommendation in relation to the Black Ferns high-performance environment is that standards of behaviour that foster a high-performance culture need to be established by New Zealand Rugby in consultation with players, management and the RPA, and then regularly monitored within NZR's operations. This should coincide with the education for players regarding responsibilities and expectations required of them in a high-performance environment to enable them to make fully informed decisions regarding whether such an environment is right for them, noting that the high-performance environment may not be suitable for everyone, players and management. And finally, under this theme, a long-term sustainable, high-performing and inclusive culture needs to be developed in the Black Ferns. There also needs to be alignment across management and players regarding what a high-performance environment and mindset looks like to win at pinnacle events, as they have done in the past. I'll now hand over to Tammy to cover the second of our themes, which is Black Ferns culture.
As we said at the outset, the culture amongst the Black Ferns is strong. But firstly, New Zealand Rugby needs to place greater focus on rights and welfare needs of players and management. As we've said, approximately 50% of the players are Māori, 25% are Pacific Island. Whilst the use of tikanga and other cultural practices are already embedded within the team to some extent, the knowledge and capability of those leading in this area needs to be harnessed appropriately to ensure that the responsibility is appropriately delegated and afforded the mana that comes with this role. NZR should give consideration to establishing a central role for someone to hold this responsibility, similar to the tūranga kaumatua in the Māori All Blacks team, given the sense of identity and pride that culture has within the team for both players and management. Thirdly, education for players on the terms of the player contract, Memorandum of Understanding, between NZR and the RPA, relevant policies and how to access complaints processes should occur regularly. For example, given the speed with which the changes have been made, the impact COVID-19 has had on in-person contact and the lack of opportunities for players to connect meaningfully with both NZR and RPA. More thorough education may need to be provided initially when players receive contracts to ensure players' understanding, and subsequent education could be provided on an annual basis. The team structures should acknowledge the importance of the NZRPA and player development manager in this space and support the relationship between the RPA, the PDM and the Black Ferns. So having the player development manager being present during assembly periods. Fourthly, the Black Ferns environment needs to endorse practices and structures to allow for psychological safety and psychological freedom. NZR needs to ensure that there is sufficient awareness of and confidence in the channels available for people to disclose or report harm. The effectiveness of these measures should be adequately monitored and evaluated in season and post-season. See health and wellbeing for players and management sections for the recommendations. And I'll hand back to Pip now for the third of our recommendations, management structures.
So this third theme around management structures, our first recommendation here is that these structures should be re-evaluated by New Zealand Rugby to ensure that they support the mechanics of high performance, such as accurate and up-to-date job descriptions, contestable recruitment processes, including key competencies such as communication capabilities, proper inductions, performance review processes, as well as ongoing professional development. It's understood that NZR has recently created 2 specific high-performance roles for women's rugby, and this is a step in the right direction. Secondly, NZR should implement measures to ensure that cultural and gender diversity is fairly represented within management roles and pathways for coaches and other staff, while still ensuring appointments are merit-based. Measures need to have clear timeframes and accountabilities attached to them, and these also need to be monitored by NZR's board. The recommendations from the Respect and Responsibility Review in 2017 in relation to setting up a coaching development framework which addresses cultural responsiveness, strengthening against harm, youth development, gender and sexuality education, should be established. It's understood that NZR currently has work underway on a high-performance coach development review. Fourthly, under this theme, NZR should set and review coaching staff and management KPIs to ensure they adequately reflect off-field priorities around wellbeing and culture, as well as on-field success. Next, NZR needs to continue to appropriately prioritise and resource the Black Ferns to ensure that the team attracts the best talent for coaching and management roles, and for the Black Ferns management roles to be seen as attractive and highly contested opportunities for those individuals. Next, there needs to be a review of the structures in place regarding the information provided to the NZR board to ensure greater transparency and accuracy, and in order for appropriate monitoring to occur, particularly in relation to health and safety and player and staff welfare. And finally, under this theme, greater control by NZR of conflicts of interest between NZR management working in the women's game needs to occur to avoid perceptions of bias or a lack of independence. This requires NZR to have an awareness of these conflicts of interest and to provide credible and legitimate options regarding how those conflicts are addressed operationally. The next theme is player leadership structures, and as I said at the outset, the player leadership structures are really positive, but management should, in consultation with the players, assess what the most appropriate player leadership structure will look like in terms of structure, personnel, and how it functions. And a second point here is that there needs to be greater investment by New Zealand Rugby in professional development and support structures for player leaders, and to develop future leaders to help them to lead a high-performance team. Our fifth theme is around communication structures. NZR needs to review the effectiveness of its communication processes and structures between NZR, Black Ferns management, players, provincial unions, hubs, Super Rugby Aupiki franchises and the RPA, with a view to ensuring more timely, transparent and effective communication. Secondly, training in how to give and receive specific and timely feedback needs to occur. Similarly, building player resilience and the ability to accept such feedback and improve from it also needs to form part of the current player development framework. A third communication structure recommendation is that systems and structures of communication, particularly regarding selection, contracting and reviewing performance, should be culturally inclusive and be adaptable to different players' communication styles and culturally gender sensitivities. This is an all-women's team, 50% Māori, 25% Pasifika. Our next theme is health and wellbeing for players and management. The Black Ferns culture needs to be strengthened to support the hauora of players and management alike and to prevent harm occurring. It's recommended that this is done in the first instance by NZR working alongside credible cultural expertise to move beyond cultural competency towards cultural safety and high performance. This will involve dismantling systems and practices that only reflect a Pākehā worldview. This could include developing more culturally appropriate forms of support and dispute resolution in the Black Ferns environment. Examples would include considering support such as kuia and kaumatua roles alongside the team and tikanga-led resolution in addition to the current EPA, psychological support and complaints mechanisms. Continuing the work begun by NZR and the RPA on the Women's Personal Development Programme is also recommended, which delivers the career planning and off-field education for players, and delivering a version of this program specifically for the Black Ferns. Second recommendation under health and wellbeing is to develop the right policies and processes and monitor these. NZR, in consultation with the RPA, needs to develop and operationalise policies and practices that aren't currently there to support players in relation to retirement from the Black Ferns, return to play following maternity leave or injury, continuing to develop and implement science-led, hauora-centred approaches and resources by appropriately qualified people to discuss nutrition, body composition, as opposed to just weight and skin fold measurement, and menstruation in ways that are performance-based and mana-enhancing. Extend and implement New Zealand Rugby's harm-free workplace policy or other safeguarding policies within the Black Ferns environment, and complete associated awareness and bystander training to help ensure culture is strengthened against harassment, discrimination, bullying, sexual harm, so that all have access to remedies should harm occur. Next, ensure mechanisms to raise and escalate issues and complaints and access resolutions are aligned in both NZR policies, such as the Harm-Free Workplace Policy and the Memorandum of Understanding. These should be updated to embrace culturally responsive avenues and current understandings of good practice, such as survivor engagement frameworks. And finally, under that point, establish the capability, roles, processes and systems to recognise wellbeing issues and address them early and consistently while on tours, so greater care is taken of players and management, both players and management, on future campaigns. And the final area of recommendations under this heading is, in terms of monitoring, NZR needs to be active in its duty of care to all employees and contractors and extend its version of the Diversity, Inclusion and Belonging Survey yearly to professional players and management to monitor their experiences and share results with them all. And NZR's People and Capability team or another suitable person or people should administer exit interviews with both players and team management. This could be an online survey, results of which could be collated and escalated appropriately within the NZR. There needs to be ongoing education and awareness for all players and team management on the ways to raise concerns, including an independent complaints management service. And finally, on that point, extend safeguarding responsibilities to online environments and develop clear policies and procedures for abuse of players and team management on NZR-controlled social media channels. The final theme is NZR structures. Our first recommendation here is talent identification processes need to ensure that the right players are identified and that there are clear development structures and pathways to develop people within the environment and provide the team with adequate depth. Secondly, more transparent investment by NZR in the women's game at all levels needs to occur to ensure that they are funded and resourced adequately to win pinnacle events in this professional environment. And finally, too many annual reviews of Black Ferns tours have resulted in little, if any, change. The players and management say they have no confidence in tour reviews. This needs to change. There was also insufficient adaptation for the reality of COVID-19 and its impacts on the last tour. A more robust and transparent process needs to be introduced by New Zealand Rugby that allows for more regular check-ins and feedback during the year and a transparent end-of-year review process. That's it from the review team. I'll now hand over to New Zealand Rugby's Chief Executive, Mark Robinson.
Thanks, Pat. Kia ora tātou. Welcome everyone, and thank you for giving up the time today at an obviously incredibly important and critical time for the game and a most important year also for rugby, especially as it relates to women and girls. And we've talked at length in recent months about how critical this time is and how focused we are on making sure we're as successful as possible in this area. I want to thank everyone that's participated in the review. It's shown to us a huge amount of compassion, care and passion for the game and for the Black Ferns especially. I want to thank the review panel, Luke, Aroni, Gilbert, Eleanor, Tammy and Pip especially for the leadership you've displayed at this time and through the last few months. Also want to acknowledge that we look forward to continuing to work with Tammy and Pip as we bed down these recommendations and look to improve and continually get better in this area. We're taking that incredibly seriously and we're looking forward to the independent accountability they will provide in this space as we work through the recommendations. So thank you again to both. I want to acknowledge all the players and management for coming forward at this time around the review and for the level of honesty we have received the feedback. And I especially want to acknowledge Te Kura, who, with her post, provided the impetus to begin this work and to commence the review. The Black Ferns have been great ambassadors for rugby since their inception and have added considerably to the mana and legacy of New Zealand rugby in that time. The current group of players and management are part of this, have achieved a huge amount as a group, and obviously this was highlighted at Rugby World Cup in 2017. And clearly up until the COVID pandemic, they remained the number one team in the world. There are good, dedicated people in management and in the playing group. After Rugby World Cup, we embarked upon a journey to professionalise the Black Ferns, their environment, and we've accelerated that journey in spite of COVID because it was the right thing to do. However, like a lot of other sports transitioning to professionalism for women in sports, we haven't got everything right, and this report highlights that. As an organisation, we apologise for not having provided all of these tools to our people to succeed, and we know and acknowledge we have a lot of hard work to do. No one should be in any doubt, however, about the commitment to progression of women's rugby in this country and how committed we are to it. The recommendations which you have now read are set out and designed to optimise the culture and environment moving forward. After assessing both the campaign and cultural reviews, we believe that Glenn is the right person to lead the coaching team, and we have committed to increasing resource in the management team to support this. Glenn is exceptionally skilled and experienced as a coach who cares deeply about the Black Ferns. We are also thrilled to have Wayne Smith now joining us as Black Ferns technical coach in support of Glenn and the overall coaching team. We know that gender diversity and balance in coaching is an area that we need to work on in respect of the Black Ferns and women's high performance environments in general. This will be one of a number of key focus areas of our current high performance coach development review that we work through this year. In the interim, we have a very talented female coach in Whitney Hanson as part of the coaching team taking the Black Ferns to Rugby World Cup. She has amazing potential, and we believe she will be a big part of the future of the Black Ferns. The management team will have increased resource and support from NZR, in particular focusing on team culture and leadership. Specific tikanga expertise also provided by New Zealand Rugby Kaihatu Māori Luke Crawford. The structure of the management team to take the group forward is supported by the player leadership group. NZR is committed to progressing all of the recommendations put forward in the review, but has identified key areas in which immediately the work can and must take place. Some great work has already happened in this space. At the start of the year, we announced the new Black Ferns performance program contracts, which see players contracted on a more full-time basis with training hubs established across 5 provincial unions. In 2021, we appointed a women's high performance manager and women's high performance development manager who are undertaking several projects that align with the recommendations that have been put forward. While these are some great foundations, the work now needs to be done in driving greater performance culture in this space. Priority will be put on supporting the player leadership structure to grow and deepen. Additional education resources and protocols for players and management will be introduced to support the duty of care that New Zealand Rugby and team management have to the players, with a focus on harm-free workplace sessions, complaints procedures and communication strategies, and continued focus on personal development plans for players through the NZRPA. There will be an emphasis on existing policies and new initiatives that focus on the health and wellbeing of players and management, with work already underway in this space. All this work will contribute to the high performance vision and standards of the program to foster a safe, sustainable, high performing environment. A Women's Pathway review will be conducted in 2022, as will a new approach to board reporting to ensure maximum transparency. So that concludes mine. I think Tammy and Pip's opening remarks. I think we're ready and willing to obviously take questions on all aspects of the review. Thank you.
Mark, can you surprised that also what the review found? I mean, 26 seems like quite a lot. I mean, how did it get this bad?
Well, I mean, that's probably a question in terms of number of recommendations that might sit with Pip. But in terms of our view, we acknowledge we've also done some very, very good things in this space over many years. However, there's no doubt that as we move into professionalism, the pace of change and wanting to grow into more full-time environments, that there have been things that we haven't acknowledged as well as we could have. I think in several parts of the report we also see some really heartening aspects of our culture, but we acknowledge we've got to do better.
And in terms of, Curtis both says here that the review wasn't ascertained whether or not it was true. Why did you think that, I guess, wasn't important?
Well, that was something that is sitting, within a restorative justice process we're working through at the moment. Has always been separate and outside of the review. Everyone part of the review has understood that.
But I just want to clarify, was this an independent review? I saw it was reported as an independent review.
Yes, it is independent. Absolutely.
Obviously, you're more familiar with reviews than I am. Can you just clarify for those who might be confused that 2 of the 4 NZR people
2 of the 4...
on the review team?
Gilbert Anoka does work with in New Zealand Rugby, and Eleanor Butterworth had previously as harm prevention manager, but she is now with ACC.
But at the time of her appointment to this review team, she was NZR?
She was, but I can assure you from the way that we ran this review that they gave us very independent insights. Tammy and I were the ones who conducted all of the interviews, not them.
Right.
So we saw the 52 people, and what we did is provide them with our summaries of each of those interviews, and they gave us their expertise around leadership, around harm prevention and the like.
How common is it that half of the review panel is made up of people from that organisation?
Well, they've got expertise in the area of rugby and harm prevention. I think what I can say is that I thought this was very well balanced in terms of bringing lots of expertise to play. I greatly benefited from having 2 senior and highly respected cultural advisors, having a leading harm prevention manager in the team, having a former Black Fern and an academic as part of the team, and someone with expertise in leadership in rugby. But they all operated independently and they gave their insights, and it was very useful.
Right. In this environment that's described in the report, how much did the coach contribute to creating that environment? I guess he's been there 7 years now.
The coach is part of the environment, but it's also part of what's invested in management by the employer, by NZR. And what we've identified is that this framework has moved very fast into a semi-professional environment, and the resourcing, unfortunately, hasn't been there to support that, the education, the training, the recruitment, the inductions, for players and management alike.
Mark, you're confident that Glenn's the right guy. Can you explain why he didn't feel it was important to be here today?
Well, Glenn will be issuing a statement later on. He may well have already issued that, so I can't speak for Glenn on that matter. But I know that when we weigh up the outcomes of the campaign review and this review, we feel he is in the best position to lead this team through to the World Cup.
I understand he's also hired his own PR company to deal with all of this, not relying on your team?
I'm not sure the details of that. It wouldn't be unusual for someone to seek out support in whatever areas they feel they might need that.
But you led the Football Ferns review 2018. There were less recommendations in that one, and the coach did lose his job. Are you surprised that Glenn's put out a statement today saying how happy he is to be leading this team to the World Cup?
The coach was had already resigned at the time that the report was finished in relation to the Football Ferns. It was a different environment, it was a different time, and this is an environment that's moved at pace. And there's a lot of good that's been done to create the memorandum of understanding and to ensure that our Black Ferns players are actually being paid. So in a number of the recommendations in this report, focus on different matters than they did in that Football Ferns one.
Just Mark, for you, what sort of assurances can you give people in your own organisation that you're going to implement change, given that in this report it says the annual team reviews just were ignored, I guess?
Well, I don't think it's fair to say that they're ignored. We acknowledge the feedback we've been provided through the review. We respect the process and the people associated with them. That is why they're remaining with us as we work through that, and we look forward to their continued independent feedback on the work that we're doing. We're in the process, I guess, there's a lot of information to work through, but we're in the process of acknowledging there's some things that we want to respond to very, very quickly as it relates to the environment and ensuring we can have every success as possible for Rugby World Cup. And then there are some other issues that may well take a little bit more time. We have never shied away from the fact that we believe this is an area of the game and women and girls that we see as critically important, particularly in 2022. Have we got everything right? No, we acknowledge that we haven't in spaces, but the intention, the commitment is there, and this provides us a fantastic roadmap to look forward and take the opportunity to improve in a number of areas. So that commitment is absolutely steadfast, and we're not hiding away from the fact that these issues exist. We're here fronting these issues as we should be, and taking them incredibly seriously.
I'm aware of a lot of the positive work that you guys do, but how distressing is it in 2022 to be reading things like body shaming, culturally insensitive comments and things like that?
Oh, look, there are aspects of the report that, as I said before, we're taking incredibly seriously. We know as we look to grow so rapidly, especially in this area of the game, with a number of things standing up that are new and exciting for the game, that we won't get everything right.
Mark, the review makes it clear there's a lot to fix in the women's game, and particularly the Black Ferns environment. It's a very broad range of suggestions of what's required. Has New Zealand Rugby failed in its duty of care for the Black Ferns?
Look, I think we're on an incredibly rapid journey associated with professionalism in the women's game, and we've said up front that we have several areas in the game that we haven't got right, and we stand by that. At the same time, I think a lot of people would acknowledge we've done a lot of really positive work. Okay, and I'm not using that at all to distract from the fact that we've got some challenges to work through. But we've worked incredibly hard. We've shown a huge amount of passion for the growth of the game, and as a result of that speed, there's certainly some things that aren't as well worked through as what they could be.
The review says there's no clear or consistent high performance vision in the Black Ferns. That seems pretty astounding. Is this a failure?
Well, I think the team certainly, and this might be something that Pip may want to speak to, but I think the culture at many levels in the Black Ferns across the player group is strong, and they have a really strong purpose associated with them playing the game and representing this team. Some of that alignment, as the report says, between the team and management needs to be improved and worked on, and we're starting to make the moves into that space as it relates to culture, as it relates to the people and communication side that we heard earlier, and the technical, tactical side of the game to try and address those things quickly.
And let's not lose sight of the fact that we've had a pandemic, and we've got a legacy with the Black Ferns of winning at pinnacle events. They've been truly outstanding, and yet we've also had a recent history of we've got a decentralised model, players all around the country, parts particularly in Auckland where they've been utterly locked down, unable to train, and not a lot of management initially, full-time employees, and players, again this comes back to communication, not always realising that, thinking that they would have more access to some of the coaching team than the coaches were able to give because they weren't full-time. Now that's all being addressed, but it's all happening at speed out the back of a pandemic.
But 2019, I think, to put away the 30th test, NZ put out this tribute video where players were talking about her impact on the team. They described her as the heartbeat of the Black Ferns. It makes me wonder how many people supported her views when she posted what she posted. Now, you've done the interviews. What's your gut feeling on how the players support her views? How will they deal with Glenn knowing that he's going to stay on?
This is a piece of work that needs to, there's some rebuilding that needs to be done. I'm not going to go into the private matters. That's obviously not something for us to talk about. I think everyone between management and players want to do that work. Our sense, Tammy, I think you'd agree, wouldn't you, is that there's a real sense of commitment to that rebuilding. We've got a Rugby World Cup in 6 months. Everyone wants to do the best for that. And so the recent camp, some very positive feedback coming out of that. So there's work to be done, no doubt. But
is it the sense you got, Tammy?
Absolutely. Sorry?
The players that sort of passed those issues? Or?
Yeah, I can't speak on behalf of the players having not been in the camp, but certainly the feedback that we've received is the strength of, the culture amongst the playing group has continued, and if not, has actually gained momentum and gotten even stronger. And I think there's a genuine commitment on the part of the players and the management, certainly aiming towards and being focused to that pinnacle event and being able to win the Women's World Cup in October, November.
But can you confirm that Te Kura's voice of dissension, of questioning the environment was by no means a lone one.
I can.
Mark, are you glad that Te Kura spoke up?
Oh, look, we want all of our players and participants right across the game to feel they are safe in their environment and have the ability to express their views. That relates to everything through our professional game and our community level. So we are very, very comfortable people raising issues about our environments, and we take all of them incredibly seriously.
And what consequences, I guess, if any, did any of the management get from this review?
Well, we're working through that at the moment, aren't we? So, as it relates to the cultural environment review, it's incredibly early days with all this information, but we are signalling we know we have to make some shifts in and around the environment to provide some support in those areas that I talked about earlier around cultural aspects, people side and communications, and the tactical.
And are you confident, I guess, you can get most of that done before the Rugby World Cup?
Look, we've got no choice but to work as hard as we possibly can, and I know that work started last week in Christchurch, as Pip and Tammy have shared, some initial positive feedback there. They go into camp again in the next 10 to 14 days, so with more opportunity to build on that. And I think the group is starting to get really excited about the opportunity now. The horizon of these major events, when you're an athlete or a coach or management team member, come very, very quickly. And I know that they want to do incredibly well. I know there's a huge amount of pride in that environment, and a legacy that everyone's talked to here over the last 25 years or so that everyone wants to maintain.
Has Te Kura been in that latest camp in Christchurch? Do you know?
No.
Mark, Pip was speaking about the football review that she was involved with, the football firms review that she was involved with. Obviously there were several other of these cultural reviews that went on, specifically a lot of them female teams, male coaches. Is there any disappointment from an NZ perspective that perhaps you didn't see those situations going on and take proactive action to prevent, you might be able to prevent what happened here around Te Kura and just the culture in general?
Look, I think all sporting environments and high-performance environments at the moment are grappling with very, very similar challenges as it relates to athletes, providing environments that we make sure are absolutely world-class in the way that they provide care and attention and well-being protocols and practices around people. So, I've said it several times today, we haven't got everything right here. We certainly have certainly noticed, I guess, the development of some of the reviews and some of the activity that you refer to, and they've certainly been, I think, acknowledged, but clearly there's some learning for us to do ourselves here.
Pip, in your view, would the Black Ferns benefit from having a female head coach?
I think you've got to have the right people in the right places. Obviously, one of the things that we've identified is that there needs to be greater investment by New Zealand Rugby in learning how to coach and work with women. And so that's something that is a work on here. Bringing in more women, increasing those pathways has got to be a benefit. But at the end of the day, as we also say in our report, it's about merit. It's the right person for the job.
Tammy, what does these systems and practices that only reflect the Pākehā worldview, what does that look like?
I think in terms of, what we've identified is that 75% of the playing group are either Māori or Pacifica, and that's not represented or reflected in the management group. And so it's just the different styles of communication, the way that people engage. And so what we're doing is we're really encouraging some work around that. So in terms of one of our recommendations of bringing in either a tūranga kaumātua that can help to support in that space, I think that will certainly make a positive contribution. And I think what needs to be recognised is it's actually not just about the players, it's actually to help support the management as well. And I think that they'll both benefit from improving those lines of communication and engaging with each other.
I guess it's one thing, how far off do you think they are at the moment?
I think certainly there's work to be done, and I think that would be recognised by both sides. And I think the other thing that you've also got to factor into the situation is there are a number of much younger players. So we're talking, the demographic sort of spread. So we've got a lot of younger players coming through, and respectfully, that's not necessarily reflected in the coaching or the management side either. So that's another consideration that adds to that piece.
Actually, I think because one of the things that was mentioned here, enabling players to receive that critical feedback, is it those younger players that are struggling with it? I guess that's what most people would assume, but maybe it's not safe to do that.
I think it's a work on for all players in that environment, and certainly because, as we've referred to, the fact that the significant growth in such a short period of time and moving into that high performance space, we talk about a performance culture and being accustomed to understanding and appreciating what that means to be working in that environment, which goes for both players and for management. And I think because it is relatively new, there have been some sort of parts that haven't quite gotten right, but with the support of New Zealand Rugby and the experts that can support in that space, bringing in additional people such as Wayne, who's worked in that environment, I'm sure that everyone can benefit from that.
Okay, we'll just, I think, one more question and then we'll wrap up.
Mark, is developing the women's coaches and perhaps having a Black Ferns head coach who's a woman a goal for the future for New Zealand Rugby?
Well, I think the work we're commencing now with the high performance coach development pathway work is a strong signal to the fact that we know we have to create greater diversity in our coaching pathway. So absolutely, that would be an aspiration for the future. But as Pippa said, we want also to balance that with having the right people in the right spaces to ensure that we get fantastic performances when our teams go on the international stage. Certainly, we've already talked earlier today about the potential we see in Whitney, and she is someone we'll continue to focus a lot of development and support around. And we look forward to there being many others coming through in recent years to come that we can also look to harness their development around as well.